made reference before the break that you felt the Biden administration bore some responsibility and for the situation in Israel, both before the attack of October 7th, before the Iran attack that just occurred over the weekend, and I have certainly been very vocal on that, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. When you say that the Biden administration bears some responsibility, of course I agree with that, but I wanted to know what you meant by that.
Well, I mean a lot of things, right? The fact that we are sending mixed messages out to the American people, that they're kowtowing to the extreme left for votes in Michigan, the fact that they've given so much money to Iran and funded Iran after so many years that Iran wasn't financially stable enough to do what it is that they're doing. And now they have, billions of dollars to be able to use and supply to Hezbollah, Hamas, anybody else, including making their own weapons. So I do believe that as much as we can sit here and spin anything, as we see in the media all the time, this is something that we are responsible for. And again, using Chuck Schumer to go out there and speak about that and try to slow down and question Israel's intentions and forbid them from doing the things and trying to dysregulate and dismantle their government. All of those are very subtle ways, I mean, some not so subtle ways of bearing a brunt and bearing some responsibility in this.
I would agree. It's interesting that the State Department came out, and of course, who did they blame for the attack by Iran on Israel? Give you three guesses.
I'm gonna guess.
The guy's got orange hair. The guy's got orange hair.
Yeah, I'm shocked. It's Trump.
So Kirby comes out and blames Trump because Trump withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal. And therefore, it's Trump's fault because Iran was so well behaved before because of the nuclear deal. And they sort of omitted the fact that they let the sanctions on Iran expire. But don't worry, the $10 billion we're sending to Iran is going to be used for humanitarian purposes. And let's just assume, for argument's sake, first of all, I think they're full of crap, but because they have no way of knowing that. But let's assume, for argument's sake, that it's correct that these billions of dollars is going to be used for humanitarian aid. If you needed the $10 billion for humanitarian aid, the $10 billion you already had put aside for humanitarian aid can now go somewhere else, right? Money is fungible. Number one, right? Number two, let's not forget that this is the country, the Biden administration abstained in the UN vote condemning Israel. Correct. Which historically, again, it's not happened. This is the Biden administration whose position, if Israel goes into Rafah to finish the job, so to speak, and destroy Hamas, there, according to Vice President Harris and according to President Biden, there will be quote unquote consequences. Right?
Yes.
Right. So I agree with you that the Biden administration does bear responsibility. And look, the thing I say all the time to people is, in the world of international politics, there are two truths. The first truth is that passivity or weakness really breeds aggression, right? With countries like Iran, and people say that Iran's an Arab country. It's not Arab, it's Persian, right? And Persians are not Arabs, and we can get into sort of that at some other point. But if you go back, and the Persian people are a history of a great and mighty people, but the current leadership only really acknowledges brute force and power politics. So the first truth is that weakness breeds aggression. But the second truth is, in sort of the chessboard of international politics, is that when your enemies no longer fear you and your allies no longer trust you, right? Then you're into the same situation. Then you're in a bad situation, which we're in right now. And I think Israel is isolated. And I want to bring up one other point, and then there's a video clip I want to get your reaction on. But I want to bring up one other point, which is that it's now Israel is perceived like the United States as a colonial or oppressor nation, right? The whole argument of South Africa and Israel's an apartheid country. Speak to that a little bit, because I know you've been on the ground there a lot. I know you go to Israel a lot. You have relations there, and the fact that speak to the inclusiveness of society and the human rights, civil rights, gay rights. I mean, people just don't understand here when they hear those. I won't even say tropes, but when they hear just blatant fake news about what's going on in Israel and what society there is like.
Yeah, I mean, you go to Tel Aviv, and it is an outpouring of just such a beautiful gay culture, right? And then you go over into any of these other countries like Iran. I mean, you can't be gay, right? I was joking during all of this when everybody was like, LGBTQ for Palestine. And I'm like, okay, you know what? You're going to go over into Gaza and they're going to kill you because of your sexual orientation. Yeah. So like, no, people are not even just being rational. What this is about, and this isn't totally answering your question, but what this is about is that two things. One, Israel has tried so many different ways by giving back land, by trying to work together with, trying to back down from, and they just keep getting attacked and attacked and attacked. When we were there in June, we went through the West Bank, and our friend said to us, when you hear what's happening and when you hear what's happening in Israel over in America, what are you hearing? And we said, oh, you hear about the refugee camps, right? And he's like, what do you guys think about when you
mean
hear
the refugee camps in Gaza?
Yeah, well, in Gaza, in the West Bank, in both, right? Because that's how it's portrayed over here, right? And when you hear about a refugee camp, what is that like? Oh, okay, well, my nieces, nephews, all the people that we were with, right? Poverty, right? Walking barefoot, nothing. Right. And so we drove past what they consider a refugee camp. And what he was showing us was, 6-bedroom homes and, Mercedes, BMWs driving the same thing. And the only way that you could really tell in the West Bank the difference between the Arabs and the Israelis is the color of their license plate. But even that, they still lived in peace, relatively speaking, just like in America, like 90% of us live in peace. There are the outliers, there are the extremes all the time in cities and even, in our suburbs that just for whatever reasons will always be a problem. But the vast majority of people are, relatively kind and generous, and these were people that worked for him. These were people that worked for his family. These were people that he did business with and for. And what's interesting is, since that time, not everybody can say that over there. There's a lack of trust now that wasn't there before. There is now, people are looking twice and are suspicious when they see somebody who's Arab that used to be their friend, because what they said was 80% of the people in that area were cheering on Hamas when it happened, which was mind-blowing. These were their friends, right? So what I can say is, when I've been there historically, everybody came together, Jews, Arabs, everybody, and for the most part really lived peacefully. Now there's actually a divide that's happening, not amongst the Jewish people, but amongst the Jews, and we almost took like a huge step backwards. The other thing was, when we went down into the south, we saw where they had infiltrated.
And for people who aren't there, what's the south versus the north? The north is Tel Aviv, the north is Jerusalem.
Yeah, and even more north of that even north of that is, Lebanon, right, and where Hezbollah is. What they consider the south.
So you're going, so the north, and you're going up to Golan Heights, and you're going. I mean, I've been to Israel, but for our listeners who haven't, we talk about north versus south, and I just wanted to give them some perspective. When we say the north, we're talking about Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, but you go further north to, to where?
To Golan, to Lebanon, to some of the kibbutzim that are north, and then you're at the border of Lebanon. And if you go south, and I don't consider, to me, the south the real south of Israel is like Eilat, and that's like the southern tip of it. But they consider the Gaza
You mean
more
down
to
by
be
the dead,
south.
down by the Dead Sea and that, you know, that area.
Yes, but they're referencing Gaza as south, and that's where the infiltration happened. And right around that whole area are kibbutzim. And kibbutzim, for Americans, well, how we have to understand it is these are the hippies. These are the people who believe in peace. These are the people who came to Israel and wanted no borders. They were shouting from the rooftops, no borders. We want to be friends with the Palestinian Arabs. And
Yeah.
so
Make
fast forward.
love, not war. Right. Make love, not war.
Right. And so there were
Right.
people there that like were screaming that from the rooftop. One of the hostages that later passed away, she would go into Gaza and pick up some individuals and bring them back to Israel to get medical care. This was obviously somebody who had trust in those that were living in Gaza. Meanwhile, there are about 3,000 people a day who cross over with visas who come into Israel for work. And they oftentimes work in the kibbutzim. And so they help out with whether it's agriculture, whether it's the homes, doing repairs on homes or whatever the case was. It was some of these same individuals who went back into Gaza and gave Hamas the maps of these kibbutzim. So the first things that they did was they took out and killed, burned, tortured, raped, whatever they did, to all of the above, to the same people that were sitting here calling for peace. So is this really about peace? Is it really about land? No, we gave them land. We gave them Gaza many, many, many years ago when we pulled out, right? This is not about land. This is not about peace. This is 100% about the ideology that they have that the Jewish state and therefore the Jews should not exist. And it's not just about the Jews. It starts with the Jews. But for your listeners, I think there needs to be some reinforcement that this is not just about the Jews. Once they have the Jews and they have Israel, they're coming for everybody else because it is an ideology that believes that everybody in the world should believe what they believe and they should be in charge, and not just Hamas. I mean, the bigger umbrella of it, but this is their spokespeople for right now. And, I could go further in my conspiracy of thinking that this Hamas was just the appetizer and the distraction for what's going to still yet to come. But I'll refrain from
I would also
elaborating.
Yeah. Well, in this show, we have tinfoil hats in the back where we can give you a tinfoil hat and you could wear one along with the rest of us who put on our conspiracy theory tinfoil hats from time to time. Anyway, most of the time I would argue justified. I mean, under the heading of conspiracy theory, I would argue that one of the reasons that that Hamas launched the attack when they did is because Israel was about to make formal peace with Saudi Arabia and Iran couldn't stand that because it would have weakened Iran's position and it would have created a new dynamic in the Middle East, one of let's call it a millennial of peace, because if Saudi Arabia makes peace with Israel, there's already sort of a détente and peace with Jordan and with Egypt and the United Arab Emirates. And then all of a sudden Iran is isolated. So to me, I mean, again, I can't prove that. But that's what I would argue. The last thing I want to do is I'm going to get in the high sign from Lord Benjamin here, but I want to play this video for you, and I want to get your reaction to this. This is former President Obama and what he had to say. Ben, if you could just tee this one up. Let's see if we can tee this one up. Maybe we can, maybe we can't. So, okay, well, Ben, if we can tee it up, you can play it. But basically, okay, so here's former President Obama saying that you have to take in the whole truth. No one's hands are clean. Basically, a moral equivalence that the Hamas attack was justified because of Israel's hands aren't clean either. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I have this conversation. Look, nothing starts in a vacuum. Let's start there. And so, but we can't justify what happened on October 7th. There is no justification. The people came into or Israel and burned, tortured, mutilated, and took hostages, not only Israeli hostages, but lest we not forget there are still American hostages that nobody is speaking about. And if this had happened in any other country, had happened on our soil, there is no way that we would allow anybody to tell us that this was justified, that this was appropriate, that this is not terrorism. It is infuriating to me that there's such hypocrisy, and that this is yet another way that we, with this oppressed and oppressor mentality and this triggering, as you've spoken about, we have set the stage for all of this to happen. And I believe that I guess when the future comes and the gates of heaven open, I'm not so sure everybody's going there.
Well said. I think what people have to understand, and I was having this conversation with someone a few days ago, 1,300 or so Israelis were slaughtered, murdered brutally on October 7th. The equivalent in the United States would be if someone launched a war against the United States, and instead of 3,000 people dying on September 11th, about 40,000 Americans had died in one attack. Does anybody now look? Let's remember what America's response was after being violated on September 11th. Yeah. With when I say only 3,000 dead, I'm not disparaging the dead. I'm just talking about versus 40,000 or the equivalent to what Israel just went through. I don't remember anybody talking about a proportionate response. I don't remember anybody talking about this moral equivalence of, well, we have to tell the whole truth, and everyone's hands are dirty here. I don't remember after the United States was attacked in Pearl Harbor that anyone was talking about moral equivalence of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. So it frankly makes my blood boil when I hear a former president, who I would argue bears direct responsibility in one form or another, that perhaps is for an after hours conversation.
It is.
For how we got here in all of this. And because one man's terrorist is not another man's freedom fighter. I don't care what they say. And as I was saying to someone the other day, Justice Potter Stewart, former Supreme Court Justice, early 1900s, when confronted with the issue of pornography, said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. Well, the October 7th attack, obviously not pornographic, but I would call them evil, right? And I can't define evil, but I know it when I see it. And that attack was evil. And if we have lost our moral compass to the point where we can't call out evil when we see it, then I think we've lost, in the West, we've lost our humanity.
But that's what I agree. And that's what we're seeing right now. These people who are protesting, why are they not, they're calling themselves, activists, right? Peace activists, yet they're protesting and they're supporting war from Iran, like on American soil, and I sit here and I'm like, you have lost your way. This is not peace activism.
They have not lost their. We've lost our way because we can't call out evil when we see it. These are the same peace activists in Chicago when Iran was
they were cheering and hating America.
They were cheering.
Yes.
Right. So
that is not a peace activist. That is war. You are cheering on war, and we are doing nothing about it. We are not calling them out. Our governors, are letting people run the streets free. They're not calling this what it is, and it's. I mean, I'm scared for my children if this moral compass is lost in our country. And look, if it's so bad here, go someplace else. Let's see how good it is.
Well, a lot of them, celebrities on down, if Donald Trump gets elected, are going somewhere else, if you believe their words. The ones that are protesting and chanting death to America will be forcibly removed, and the Bruce Springsteens of the world and Bette Midlers of the world and the Chers of the world are leaving if Donald Trump gets elected. By the way, if there wasn't a good enough reason to reelect Donald Trump, to see those people leave the country would be a really good reason to elect Donald Trump as far as I'm concerned. But with that, we'll leave you on the following note. First, I want to thank you for joining us. Your busy schedule, just to get some on the ground, really firsthand experience as to what's really going on in Israel versus what the media is portraying, and what the media is the narrative that they're trying to sell us on. But as you know, and as I know, we'll leave with this simple truth: if Hamas or the Palestinians lay down their arms,
I say this
there
all
would
the
be
time.
peace.
Mm.
If Israel lays down their arms and gives up its rights to self-defense,
There'd be no Israel.
there would be no Israel.
Mm-hmm.